Hey everybody, it's Chris. This is another Lazy Chucker Disc Golf review brought to you by the Hazy Shade in Dayton, Ohio. Thank you to them for their support this year, making all these reviews possible. Today we're going to be looking at the Westside Discs Warship. Now the Warship is a slightly older mold. I believe it was released in 2011, December 2011. I'll put the correct date up top so you can see that. Whether I'm right or not, we'll see. And what can I say about the Warship? Well, its numbers are 5601. I think those are slightly changed recently. And I think that's fairly accurate. Maybe a little more fade out of the box, maybe not, but that glide especially I think is pretty accurate. And I'd categorize this as a workhorse mid. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, what I mean is it's not going to be like a Justice or a Verdict where you throw it and it fades. It's not going to be a super flippy disc where you throw it and it just turns over around a corner or you have to really hyzer flip it to get to go straight. Instead, out of the box, it should be fairly flat. You should be able to throw it. It might fade a little. If you put it on hyzer, it should hold the hyzer, and if you put it on turnover line, it should turn and maybe fade out at the end. Other workhorse mids, to get the point across. Here's some iconic discs. In this review, you will see a KC Pro Roc, my first ace. That'll be a side story in this video. Back in the day, if you looked at an Innova Pro's bag, you probably had a handful of rocks in there to hit a ton of lines in the mid category. On Discraft, we're gonna have a Buzzz. Again, both of these discs are discs straight out of the box. You'll be able to throw, maybe a little bit of fade, but hit a lot of lines with. And the third disc is the Dynamic Discs Truth. Now this is an older run Truth, so it's going to throw like an Emac. And if you think Emac Truth, Roc, or Buzzz, you're thinking of a disc that can hit a lot of lines. That's where the Warship fits as well. Of the four discs, I would say it is the least overstable. So it's going to go the straightest. It's the most neutral of the four, sorry. And I think it's the glidiest. If you give this disc height, it wants to just keep pushing forward. That was one of the biggest differences for me. You're going to see a lot of lines. I'm going to pick up the Truth as an example, where they're going to get to the same spot, but the Warship went up and faded out to the spot, whereas the Emac Truth or the Truth would have stayed on the hyzer and got to the spot. So they might land in the same spot. That's why I consider them both workhorse mids. They're going to get to those different landing zones, but they might do it slightly different. So take that as you will. It might actually be a better disc for your personal game if you like to float things as opposed to just cutting through quickly. That said, normal caveat, I throw about 400 feet max with my distance drivers. So if you throw shorter than that, expect the Warship to be slightly more overstable out of your hand. And if you throw longer than that, if you throw 500 feet, expect it to be flippier out of the hand. So if you throw really far, you might have to flip it up to get those lines. If you don't throw as far, you might have to flex it a little. But also, if you have a slower arm speed, this 5-speed disc with 6 glide might be really good for your game. All right, so if you have any questions or comments, please put them below so I can get back to you. Otherwise, we'll go to the field. You can see it in flight there, and then we'll take it to the course so you can see those comparisons. But the Westside Discs Warship is a fantastic older mold that has kind of been pushed to the wayside by newer releases that maybe deserves another look. So go grab one. Hazy Shade has a bunch. Or check out your local shop. I know some Trilogy Challenge ones are out there currently. But yeah, Warship, great disc. Thanks for watching. Go Tigers. All right, let's start with wing comparison. Here you can see the Warship has a sharper wing than the KC Pro Roc. Isn't quite as tall either, but they're going to feel somewhat similar in the hand. The Buzzz, I was actually surprised by how tall it is, but you can see here again, blunter nose, doesn't feel as fast in the air, and slightly different flights, of course. And then you have the Truth, which has a wing that's almost as wide as the Warship's, but isn't quite as tall. Next we have a pair of field throws. First 75%, just right down the middle. You can see just a slight tilt on the release. That's going to cause this disc to go pretty straight line with a little bit of fade at the end. And then powering it up, and I did tilt this one again, but giving the Warship height is where it really excels. You can see it just continue to push forward and does fade out at the end. About 310 feet, it was pretty impressive. Now let's start those comparisons. First up we have the KC Roc. These are both taller mids. You're going to see them in general. I tend to give the Roc a little bit more room on the right to fade back. But again, these discs are going to end up in very similar spots. The Warship's right underneath the basket, and the Roc is in the basket. Quick side story, almost forgot to put it in. Yes, you did just see this Roc go in the basket, which is kind of cool because it was my first ace disc way back in 2007. And this is the first time I'd thrown it since then. It was in December. This is a review that's taken a little bit, but it was exactly 15 years and 2 months apart, which I thought was pretty cool. So, review ace on my first ace disc on camera, kind of fun. Okay, after that interlude, back out to the course. What you're going to see here is the Roc is released slightly right of where the Warship is released, and all through the flight they're actually going to track pretty similar. The Warship moves a little bit more right and left than the Roc, but the Roc will fade a little bit faster, and the Warship is going to end up just farther out into the grass. Into a protected pocket, this is one of those throws I was talking about. The Warship's going to be thrown pretty flat, whereas the Roc is thrown with a little bit of hyzer on the right side. But again, if you look where these discs go, one, the Warship is just going to push a little bit past the Roc, but they end up in very similar landing spots. And then one more, I'm going to turn the Roc, I'm going to turn the Warship. You'll see the Warship was turned a little bit flatter. It's keeping a slightly straighter flight, whereas the Roc is kind of looping more from left to right. But again, those discs end up within a foot of each other. Now let's go on to the Buzzz. As I mentioned, Warship thrown with height, Buzzz kind of thrown with an angle. I explained this with the Truth in my hand, but you can see it happening here. That Buzzz was thrown with angle. It's going to end up actually left of the basket. This is one of my favorite comparisons for these two discs. Both were thrown very well for this hole. You can see both flipped up. The Warship's turning out a little bit. The Buzzz is holding that line. It's going to fade out into the Buzzz is actually in a perfect landing spot, and the Warship goes past that landing spot. So both are really good throws. Here we go on that downhill. Again, that Warship is just going to take that gentle drift right. The Buzzz is given a little bit more shape, kind of similar to how that Roc was thrown. And again, they're going to end up really close to one another. Now onto the Truth. You're going to see two different color Truths here. They fly almost identically. And again, here is that difference in flight. Both discs thrown fairly flat. Truth flips up and is going to hyzer out a little bit more, whereas the Warship pushes forward. And the Truth will end up left of the Warship on this one, but fairly similar finishes. And here's that big difference you'll be able to see. The Warship is thrown flat out to the right, or I'm sorry, this is actually fairly similar. Truth is thrown flat up the middle with a little bit more height, so it fades, but both discs just hold the line they're put on. And then one last comparison with the two, you can see I released the Truth with a lot more hyzer. It did flip up to flat, but that is going to cause it to fade out more than the Warship. But again, both are in good landing zones. Truth was just a little bit left of it. Quick recap, the Westside Discs Warship is a mainstay mid of many Trilogy bags over the last decade plus. With flight numbers 5601, it's a shapeable mid that stacks up well against other iconic mids over the last couple decades. It can hit a lot of lines, even if I didn't show them all in this video, and my apologies for that. Once again, quick shout out to Hazy Shade. Thank you for all the support this year in making these videos possible. And if you like this video, please feel free to like it, share it, or even subscribe to the channel, and be on the lookout for the next one.